Alice, are you there? Nothing yet. A little technical difficulty here. Please hold.
Robert, this is Jen. I can go ahead and get started while we wait for Alice if you'd like.
Yeah, Jen, why don't we just rotate and maybe have the expectations section go first?
I can do that.
And then we'll try and squeeze in Alice at second.
Perfect. Thank you all for joining us. I know for some of us it's the end of a long day, which has also included a time change and a full moon. And if you have children and have had crazy Halloween adventures, we probably all need a collective deep breath. So let me just guide us through one very quickly, because I know I really need one. So thank you again. We're going to run through some expectations. As we all know, how will I know and how much warning will I get? This is weather. It's the Pacific Northwest. Weather-driven responses are incredibly hard to predict. I know I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. We always wish that we could give more time. We wish we had more time. We wish we could share more time, but that's just not a reality of this kind of an activation. And so the best way to stay informed is for you to monitor the weather yourself. Also to sign up, 211 has a severe weather alerts notification email, and they'll let you know when we're activated for severe weather. And so those are two ways to really stay informed. The thresholds we'll share with you so you can kind of monitor for those thresholds. I think it's 25 degrees or below for multiple days. I won't get these exactly right, but we'll make sure that we share them with you. Or an inch of driving rain or snow accumulation. So keep an eye on those is a really great way. But other than that, it's winter, and just be prepared as much as you can be. We'll give you as much notice as we can, but it will be less than you desire. And I just want to be really honest and upfront with you about that. The other thing about that is because it's weather and it's unpredictable, we will generally overschedule. So let's say the weather event is expected to last for 3 days. We may schedule shifts for days. And so we really encourage you to go ahead and lean forward and sign up, but it's just so much easier than it is to try to ramp up. So we do tend to schedule a bit farther. So if you really want a shift, I would suggest activation and at the tail end of it canceled. You'll know about severe weather. Email often includes about what areas of town are we activating, where are those shelters, what are the needs, and then a link to sign up for the shifts. Now, be really careful as you read through that. I know a lot of us like to skip all the narrative and we like to jump right into the meat of everything. But it's really important. That information is there to inform and to make sure that you know everything that you can about the shifts and the situation and the size of the shelter and what the expectations are for that activation, whether we know it's really snowy out and things can be a little dangerous, or if you need to plan a TriMet ride, or if you want to carpool with somebody. So please read through all of that information. We get really great briefings from the National Weather Service, and we try to share that information forward with all of you. So, and then in the links, sometimes it will say, this position is only to be filled by a net team member, or this is a volunteer only position, or this has to be a Multnomah County position. So just make sure as you look at those links that you're really clear about who you are, what role you play, and how you can sign up to be a part of this activation. If you have questions, there's always a person to contact on those emails. And also in the Sign Up Genius itself, if that's the tool that we're using, there's also a link in that narrative that says, here's how to reach us. So please do read those thoroughly. As I said, because weather conditions change, at any time, we cancel with little to no notice. If you're a county employee and you're flexing your time, we would encourage you to make sure you flex after your shift. We have had some situations where people flexed ahead of their shift in anticipation of it, and then the shift got canceled. And so then they lost out on some hours. So I would definitely make sure that you work your shelter shift before you flex your regular time to make sure that that doesn't happen to you. Like I said, we do tend to build out our schedules. And so the tail end of activations can often be canceled early, and we can demobilize those shelters ahead of our anticipated timeline. So I want to make sure that we're really clear about that. What should I bring or not bring, where or not where? As we know, dressing warm and comfortably, you're in a shelter environment. Leave your valuables at home. There often isn't great staff space to store things. So we also don't want you to leave anything in your car or if you're on transit. So if you need to bring a little bag or something, make sure you can tuck it away. Bring the least amount of stuff possible, and dress in layers, something you can tie around your waist if you get warm, or the coat you can throw on if you need to do an outside perimeter check for the shelter itself, or you need to engage with some guests out in the outside. So maybe a hat and some gloves, but be prepared for what the weather looks like outside, and also the fact that you are not going to have like a locker or necessarily have a staff locking space to put things. So just keep that in mind as you pack up your items. How do I cancel? What if it gets dangerous out there? We do activate in some icy, snowy conditions often. So it is possible to cancel a shift due to emergency or illness. Of course, we know that things come up and happen. So we want to make sure that people are prepared for that. But try to give us as much notice as possible. And if you're not comfortable driving in winter weather or have an alternate transportation plan, I would suggest just maybe not signing up for those snowy shifts. Sometimes we activate just for cold weather and it's perfectly dry outside, or maybe it's an inch of rain expected. It's not always snow and ice. So if maybe snow is not something that you're comfortable driving in, you might not sign up for those shifts. Also, we list the shelter locations, so it's great to map those, make sure that the shelter location is close to your house so that you're not maybe going from Gresham to downtown, or if you don't want to, or vice versa. And then almost all of our shelters are very accessible by TriMet. But remember to build in that transit time into your schedule, because as we know, when it gets gnarly outside, TriMet tends to slow down and cut routes. So let's make sure that we build in that transit time as well. And carpooling, if you've got a neighbor or a friend who likes to activate along with you, carpooling can be a really great option. For Multnomah County employee expectations, supervisors, OT, if you have any extra questions, for trainings, for shifts, your supervisor permission is required. Please work with them in advance. So like maybe reach out, and I'm sorry for you non-Multnomah County folks, but it's pretty important for our staff who work in our shelters to reach out in advance and say, hey, I'm on the severe weather activation team. I'm a shelter worker. When things come up, how do you want me to handle it? And how would you like me to bill that? What would that look like? And if your supervisor doesn't have those answers, your department HR absolutely will. So reach out through them if you need to, and then talk about what your department's doing around OT versus flex time or other time coding questions. It's just really important that we know that information ahead of time, and it will save you a lot of headaches moving forward. A few things about shelter staff roles, and there are a lot of folks out there who have these big, beautiful hearts, and they want to help out a lot. And that's why you guys do this work with us. I think it's just really important that what we're talking about here is maintaining people's baselines and keeping them out of the cold. So there's a lot of things that you can encounter during an activation, a shift. And I just want to be clear that we're not trying to do wraparound case management services, or we're not providing clinical services inside of the shelter environment. We are providing folks a place to stay warm and stay alive outside of the shelter, outside of the sidewalks and streets. So we should not expect that you're performing a high level of work like you might during your regular position. Now, that does not mean that we're not sharing resources with folks and making sure that they're aware of what opportunities are available to them. But right now, we're just trying to make sure that people can be warm and get something to drink and stay healthy during the activation. In most shelters, there will be a shelter coordinator or a shift lead. There's also general staff and behavioral health staff. And then there's either going to be on-site medical or on-call medical support. On-call might look more like a number that you can call to get some medical advice for someone, or a 911 call if necessary. Or we may have medical reserve corps or some other kind of professionals in that environment as well. And so there's a lot of different roles. But everyone's responsibility for making sure that people are safe. It's everyone's job to de-escalate. It's everyone's job to monitor the bathroom if we need to. So just making sure we're clear that we're all there for the same goal, which is have a healthy, productive shelter experience. And your tool 4 is your position description. It includes specific, or it includes really general responsibilities for everyone, but then your shelter lead or shelter coordinator will also might assign you specific roles throughout the day. So maybe you're in charge of the snack station, or maybe you're in charge of bathroom monitoring, or maybe one of the exit doors or areas. So we give you general descriptions, but it is up to that shelter coordinator to make sure that the health and safety is maintained in the shelter. And so your role might shift throughout the activation, or it may stay the same, but just wanted to share that information with you. Alice, I see you. You're here.
Now the next is, can you hear me?
Yes, we can even hear you. It's genius.
Just a sign out, sign back in, I guess.
Oh, perfect. I just want to touch on the health expectations, and then we'll pass it back to Alice for her wonderful section. But many people, including the people that utilize emergency warming shelters, have chronic illness, medical conditions. These can be alarming if it's your first activation, and also if you've done it for years. But it's also this person's baseline, and it's something that they deal with every day. So you might see sores or lesions. You might see some just really chronic conditions that you're not used to seeing. But it's important that we don't make decisions for the guest about what their needs are. We can check in with them and say, hey, are you doing all right? Do you need anything? If they say no, then that's the answer. And we don't want to harass or prod that person for more. If you feel like 911 is necessary, we share that information with the shelter coordinator, and then the coordinator will make that call. So we're not saying that those aren't options. We just want to be clear that you might see some things that you haven't encountered before. We want to make sure that we're drawing our attention to that. Shelter staff should know that they can request a guest to be evaluated by either on-site MRC staff or through one of the on-call individuals. There's 3 different levels. A medical, is Aaron supposed to be doing this section actually? Because I saw Aaron was on here. Is that Aaron Monig? It is.
Well, it is me. I'm on. I'm here to answer questions.
Oh, okay. I'll keep going then, and then you correct me if I'm wrong. Team Shelter. So one is a medical emergency or 911 request with an immediate medical response and basic first aid. An acute non-emergent medical condition that should go to an emergency department or be treated. Or 3, a minor or chronic medical condition where they provide first aid and recommend follow-up care the next day. So we want to be clear that the medical reserve corps and or an on-call medical professional be the one guiding that conversation. And I appreciate in advance your concern and caring for our fellow community members. And I also just want to encourage you to follow in that triage line. It exists for a reason. We want to use that when we need it, but we definitely don't want to bog down, especially right now with all of the protocols. That ambulance has been out of commission for quite a while, being thoroughly sanitized and restocked and all of that. So we'll use it when we need it, and we're going to hope to not when we don't. When medical reserve corps is not there, the threshold for calling 911 for emergency evaluation should be that the person is experiencing something that is new, different, or unusual for that person. Again, we have some severe chronic illness in our shelters. So check in with that person and see how they're feeling about what's happening to them. indicative of something that's other than a chronic medical condition. So is this cough new or different than you've had before? Is this difficulty breathing new or different than you've had before? So checking in and allowing the guest to drive that decision. Please contact your leadership and talk through issues rather than maybe filing a complaint with OSHA or with your supervisor. We want to know if things aren't working. We want to provide safe and healthy and consistent operations in our shelters. We can't see everything all the time, so we really count on all of our staff and volunteers to share that information up. So please connect with whoever you feel comfortable. Please, if it's your shelter coordinator, do that. And let them know that you're seeing something or doing something that doesn't feel safe. And we will definitely explore what's happening and find out if we need to make a fix or if we need to change some training or if we need to restock some supplies. But please start with that. Again, then, if you do that and you don't feel satisfied with it, you can go your own course. But please at least give us the opportunity to correct and discuss the issue that's being presented. We would really appreciate it. And thank you, Quinn, for putting in the register for 211 alerts. I really appreciate that. That is the end of my section. Aaron, is there anything you want to add to that that medical section I fumbled through?
I don't think so. I think that the basic gist is that when possible, we will have a medical reserve or a medical person there if we can swing it, if they're available and we can get them there. And if not, know that 911 is an option. If it's an acute issue or something new or different that you're worried about, they will come. And we have the ability to follow up with them after that happens.
Awesome. Thank you. Quinn, did you want us to pause for questions on that, or do you want to just jump into Alice's section?
Also, I do want to jump into questions. I haven't seen any specifically in the chat box, but I want to give just 5 seconds to see if anyone quickly puts one in there. And if not, we will move to Alice. So let me just slide up in our presentation materials, and then we'll see if anyone has a question. All right, no questions. Well, then, Alice, if you wanted to jump into the health and safety information.
All right. First, just echo everybody in saying thank you to those of you who tuned in tonight. We have over 400 people in Multnomah County, the Multnomah County, our organization, who are trained to do shelter staffing. And so we were wondering what to do when only 16 people tuned in, but we are very glad that you all are here. And please do, Robert, help me keep an eye on the chat to see if there's any questions as we're going along. So hopefully most of you have already watched our 2.5 hours of videos about how to engage with the different types of folks that we work with, and the vision, mission, and values of Multnomah County. And this part of it is, and I'm glad that Aaron's on. I was a little nervous covering this part instead of having somebody from health do it. So health and safety, working in a shelter during COVID, and currently we have an illness called Shigella that is out and about. So there's not that it hasn't always been a really good idea to practice safety precautions. It is certainly pretty critical now for us all to make sure that we're paying a lot of attention to safety precautions. So, and I am guessing that Robert, everyone has this document. Is that correct? The one that we're looking at?
Not yet, but it will be distributed following the event.
Okay. So if you're anything like me, the document that's on the screen is really hard to read because I got glasses. So essentially what we are wanting to cover is the top tier of what we think is really important. And for those of you who are on this call, you know that we have something called a 204, which is a job assignment. And in the job assignment is all of the health and safety actions that need to be taken. And those are all written in there, and they will be attached. The 204s will always be attached to our Sign Up Genius. So when you sign up for a shift, you'll want to make sure you download that 204 and review it. And just like Jen said, don't just skip through it. Make sure that you review it carefully to capture anything that might have changed since this phone call or anything new that came up. We make sure that we update those job assignments. Okay, what to do if you feel sick? Don't come in. We don't want you if you are not feeling well. And that is a wide range of not feeling well. So that means if you have a stomach ache, if you have diarrhea, if you have a fever, if you have a cough, if generally you're just not feeling yourself, then we would much prefer that you give us a call and tell us that you're not going to make your shift. And we will cover your shift with, oh my goodness, now where I am. Okay, so this is just my Halloween version of the presentation. So don't come in if you're sick. And even though we've been saying that from the very beginning of our Emergency Operations Center activation, I have now sent home 2 people who I had another staff member say that they overheard them saying that they didn't feel well. And so it always makes me a little uncomfortable to go up to somebody and say, hey, if you're not feeling good, go home, and then kind of follow them out of the building to make sure that they actually do go home when they're not feeling well. Please don't come in if you're sick. We totally understand and support you in canceling, even last minute, if you've been vacillating. But try and let us know as early as you can that you're not feeling well, and we will try and find coverage for your shift. Mask wearing. So face coverings are required the entire time that you're working your shift. I'm only not wearing my mask at this very moment because I am alone in a room, so alone in the room that the room doesn't really realize I'm even here, and it turned the lights off on me. So when you are working in the shelters, we are asking everyone to wear their mask, and wearing your mask means that it needs to cover your nose and your mouth. I don't know about the rest of you, but I now have several masks, and some of them I like for show, but they're not very comfortable for a duration. And others I wear when I'm going to have to be wearing a mask for multiple hours. So please choose to bring one of those masks and make sure that you're wearing it at all times while you're working in the shelter. Physical distancing at the shelters. Early in this incident, the World Health Organization and the Centers for Disease Control stopped calling it social distancing and instead started referring to it as physical distancing. We want to make sure that people stay socially connected, but physically apart. So at least 6 feet. And that 6 foot of distance is sometimes a little challenging to maintain when other people are not respecting that 6 foot distance. So you may feel a little like I do sometimes on the freeways where people drive in front of me and they take out that 2 seconds of space in between me and the car ahead. I sometimes feel like I'm going backwards as I'm allowing that space. But if you have repeated issues with people that the same person not respecting the 6 foot distance, please let your disaster resource center or shelter manager know. And they can address that person themselves. We do everything we can to make sure that people are safe in our shelters and our disaster resource centers. And if we are having a guest that is not adhering to that safety rule, we do our best to work with that guest. But ultimately, that is safety, and we will have to ask a guest to leave if they're not respecting the 6 foot distance. So physical distancing at our shelter sites is strictly enforced. Hand washing. There are a lot of cooties out there, not the least of which is COVID. And a lot of those cooties can live for a long time on surfaces. So what we're learning about COVID, and it keeps changing, but what we know now is that 24 hours is a good time period for leaving COVID on surfaces, and then people come in and it's very easy to clean. But it is really hard to clean all of the surfaces. And so there is nothing better, not wearing gloves, not avoiding touching things. There is nothing better than washing your hands. So even if you are wearing gloves, it is still best practice to wash your hands before you touch your face, in any, your steering wheel and lots of other things. Certainly hand sanitizer is going to be available at our shelters. And there's nothing that replaces washing your hands. So when you wash your hands, we want you to wash your hands for 20 seconds. And we've been working throughout this incident in the Emergency Operations Center, and there's all sorts of things in our restrooms about songs that you can sing while you're washing your hands. I'm a big Trekkie person, and so I do the, exploration statement while I'm washing my hands, just to make sure that I wash my hands. Sometimes I sing happy birthday to myself twice, which is the duration that you need to be washing your hands. And you can even pretend like you're a doctor or a nurse as you're washing your hands. You get in between the webs of your fingers, right? And then kind of into your wrists. But essentially you want to wash your hands really frequently. And that's, to me, sometimes having hand sanitizer is something that I try and avoid using, just so I remind myself to wash my hands pretty frequently. The other half of washing your hands is avoiding touching your face and any orifice that can transmit any cootie in your body that is not yours. So norovirus lives on surfaces for 14 days. There is no way to wash surfaces often enough to help prevent the spread of the norovirus. And that norovirus is something that I'm going to talk about a little bit further down in the conversation here. But Shigella is another virus that can be transported on surfaces. So again, there is no way for me to stress strongly enough the importance of washing your hands and the frequency which you should be washing your hands. All of our moms would be proud of us with the frequency with which we've been washing our hands throughout this duration. Cleaning procedure. There are gloves available at the shelter for staff to use. Now, there's different kinds of gloves. There are the nitrile gloves that help protect yourself from body substance that are not yours. However, there's also gloves at the shelters that are puncture resistant gloves, and those should be worn anytime you're carrying something might have sharps inside of it. So things like trash. I remember the very first time I ever staffed a shelter, I was being very helpful. I was mopping, I was sweeping, and I was emptying the trash. And I took one of those bags of trash and I started to push it into the trash disposal. And one of the shelter staff really let me know how dangerous that was and how frequently there are things that are sharp in the trash. So there's puncture resistant gloves, and there's also nitrile gloves that will be available at the shelter site. General cleaning. My husband would love it if I cleaned at home as often as I clean in a shelter or at the EOC. So it is hourly cleaning when we're in the shelters now. And that's, in a way, that's really great because sometimes if you've ever been working in our shelters, there's lulls in the activities. You might be handing out cocoa, you might be providing socks to guests, or interacting and building rapport with folks and checking in on how they're doing. And then there's some downtime. And anytime you have downtime now in the shelters, you can fill that downtime with cleaning. We have all of the supplies for folks to do cleaning, and we think of, I think we refer to them as high touch surfaces. So desks and doorknobs and cabinets, anything that you think folks would be touching, that's a good thing to be cleaning off. And so we have lots of stuff that you can use to clean with. So I want to pause just for a second. Does anybody have any questions so far?
We do We do have one question, and that was, are people over 60 allowed to volunteer at the shelters?
People over 60 are allowed to, oh, hey, somebody must have come in the room. So people over 60 are allowed to volunteer at the shelters, although we don't recommend it. That is an at-risk population, and we are trying to minimize those folks who are working with us that might have someone at home who they are caring for, or themselves have an underlying medical condition. But that is something that is a personal decision for you. We are not disallowing people from volunteering. And we do have people that have been working with us here in the Emergency Operations Center and at our shelters that fall into one or more of the categories of increased risk. COVID is a community spread illness. It is out in the community. So as soon as you leave your home, you are taking on a certain level of risk. And then every that you engage in after that can increase your level of risk, i.e. if you're choosing not to wear a face covering, you're increasing your level of risk. So people over 60 can voluntarily sign up to get paid to work in the shelters as a county staff member, but that's something that they need to seriously consider. Are there other questions so far? Okay. Okay, so the next section in the document that I just want a big shout out to Robert, who put together this document for us and has made this presentation extremely easy and is allowing Jen and I to take some credit for his hard and diligent work. So thank you, Robert. Demonstrating symptoms. So one of the things that we learned early on is that it was really challenging to have county staff willingly work in an environment where people were symptomatic and possibly had COVID. So early in this incident, we have opened something called a voluntary isolation motel. Everyone refers to it as a VMO at this point. Voluntary isolation motels are designed to take someone who has symptoms, provide a COVID test for them, and if they are positive, provide supportive care to ensure that they are not in a congregate or group environment. And if they are negative, that they are cleared to go back to a congregate environment. Jen brought up something when we started this, where she said, these winter weather shelter events are maintaining baseline. And Jen also mentioned just how challenging and difficult it can be to be surrounded by people who are experiencing things that it's really hard. It's really hard for me to believe that we are okay with allowing other human beings to experience the things that people experiencing homelessness often are experiencing. It is this shelter work is a life-altering experience. You won't be the same after you have done this work. It is incredibly important work, and that doesn't mean that everybody has the same level of comfort. We have been working voluntary isolation motels from nearly in the beginning, and county staff are staffing those hotels and interacting with guests with a 6-foot distance throughout the entire time of this activation. And those county staff have chosen to do that work. And therefore, if you are working in a winter weather shelter or disaster resource center and someone that is a guest and is experiencing symptoms, then you notify the shelter coordinator or manager or disaster resource center coordinator, and they will make sure that that person is almost immediately, and sometimes it can take an hour, but almost immediately transported over to our voluntary isolation motels. We have 2 of them right now, and we want to make sure that we get folks that are symptomatic out of that group situation as soon as we can. And so we have a very smooth process now for which to get folks into a higher level of care and separated out from the group situation that we will be in during winter weather sheltering. There is a list of symptoms that you will be provided when you start your shift. You can also certainly look on our website. We have a list of all of the symptoms, but there's a list of questions that shelter staff ask the guests and helps us determine whether or not someone has a new or worsening cough, like Jen mentioned earlier. Emphasize on notifying a lead. Okay, so yes, if you are not serving as the lead, and I'm not sure if we have any disaster resource center coordinators on the call or any leads, but if you are one of those folks, then we will make sure that you are familiar with the process with which to get someone to a VMO that needs to go. And if you are just a staff member, then all you have to do is tell the person that you were introduced to as your lead or your DRC coordinator, and they will make sure that they get that person to our VMO. Shigella. Well, it has a very pretty name and a really nasty etymology. Shigella is essentially bloody diarrhea, and it is a gastrointestinal illness. Unfortunately, Shigella and COVID share the diarrhea commonality in the symptoms. And so we don't know if somebody who's experiencing diarrhea is suffering from Shigella or norovirus or COVID. So that is symptomology, and that person would be moved to a voluntary isolation motel as well. Shigella is the same as the preventative measures and the precautions that you will be taking for COVID are the same precautions that you will be taking for Shigella, and that is that you're going to wash your hands a lot. You're going to make sure that you're wearing your face covering, and you're going to participate in helping us keep the shelters clean by cleaning every hour. And that has so far kept the vast majority of our folks safe. In fact, I think of our entire operation here, we've only had one of our providers that got Shigella. So we've been doing a really good job of keeping people safe by really making sure that our cleaning supplies are readily available and that we're helping people understand how to do that cleaning. One thing that I think Jen also brought this up was the early notification to someone that's in a lead role or a coordinator role. I can recall a winter weather event where I found out that people were throwing up and had diarrhea when 10 people at the shelter were throwing up and had diarrhea. I would much rather find out about that when only one person has diarrhea and is throwing up, because we move those folks out and get them out of a shared environment so that we can really minimize the contagion. And while I did mention earlier that it can take us up to an hour to get a person moved from our group site to one of the voluntary isolation motels, and while we are waiting, we separate out that person and make sure we give them extra space, and we try and minimize anybody walking in that area. Norovirus, actually, you can catch the norovirus by walking through a room after somebody has vomited, and inhaling certain parts per million. That face covering, keeping people separate, cleaning things, avoiding touching your face, and washing your hands are great ways to prevent all kinds of viruses and illnesses. And again, our COVID precautions keep us safe from a lot of other unfortunate cooties. Consideration for and the response process to bed bugs. So the county actually used to have an organization that was a bed bug task force. And we have a lot of experience dealing with bed bugs. And bed bugs are a pest that you can get when you're riding on a bus or in any shared space. They are really annoying. And as a county employee, if you do end up getting bed bugs from any situation that you got while you were working, there is a process that you can follow that will help pay for the remediation of that. And Robert, you are such a rock star. He even has the bed bug protocol listed and identification and understanding linked in this document. So when you get that, if you are curious to learn a little bit more about bed bugs, then you can check that out. I will. Oh, and he's highlighting it for everybody to look at also. That is so awesome. So I didn't know that there's actually a bed bug dog that comes out and can tell you whether or not the bugs that you're seeing are bed bugs or not. So some of us have gotten to meet the dog. We also have a new process where there's little feet that go underneath some of our cots, and that helps us identify whether or not we have bed bugs. Just because one area has bed bugs, it doesn't necessarily mean that the whole area has bed bugs. So during this incident, we've had a couple of incidents where we have had to treat for bed bugs, and I'm not going to get the numbers exactly correct, but I think we had over 100 guests, and 6 of the cots had bed bugs. So we had to treat those bed bugs and help those guests with their belongings to make sure that we clean those belongings. We have a bed bug oven. So we have a lot of things in place that can deal with remediating bed bugs. And one of them is an early alert that we've got any of those issues. What to do in the case of escalation, de-escalation techniques. So I would love to tell a story about de-escalation. We had a person during this incident that said that they were walking into one of the shelters, and a guest said, "Hey, what are you doing on your phone?" And they said that it was none of that guest's business. And then all of a sudden the guest was escalated, and they used their de-escalation techniques to try and de-escalate the guest, but it did not work, and they ended up leaving. I would say that the lesson there is the de-escalation techniques don't necessarily work so well if you've already escalated a guest. So avoiding the escalation in the first point is probably the best way to approach that kind of situation. If a guest says something that you feel like is a little inflammatory, just ignore it. And if you feel like a guest is making you nervous, then you can go to your lead. Leads often have additional training and are directly connected to support services that can help out in those situations. Most of our guests, while they may engage in behaviors that make people that are not accustomed to working with this population uncomfortable is different than unsafe. So if somebody is yelling or crying or screaming, those things can make you pretty uncomfortable. But understanding the difference, you're being honest with yourself about what is uncomfortable and what feels unsafe is going to be really important for us as shift leads and disaster resource center coordinators. Those folks can move you from one area of the shelter to another area of the shelter. If you are maybe doing bathroom monitoring and somebody is upset because you had to ask them to come out of the bathroom when the 5 minutes had already gone by, then maybe going to sweep or to mop or to clean or to hand out cocoa or socks. So we can move folks around to try and minimize any of that discomfort. Certainly always come to someone if you are feeling need to know that. But de-escalation techniques are a wonderful thing to deploy if you have that training. If you don't, please reach out to your shift lead or your disaster resource center coordinator, and they should be able to help you out with that. It looks like there's an SOP also for Mount Scott with de-escalation.
Alice?
Yes, I think I got it all.
It's Jen. Great job. I just wanted to add that we do not in any way look down upon you, a staff person coming and saying this particular assignment I've received right now isn't really working for me. So please don't think that means you'll never be accepted for another shelter shift or that there'll be a punishment of some kind. We would really, really rather hear from you and adjust accordingly. than have you be miserable during your shift or feel unsafe in any way, shape, or form. So there is no retaliation or concern with that. Talk to us, share with us, let us know your needs, and the shelter coordinators are trained to reassign and reshuffle and do what needs to be done to make sure that our staff feel safe and healthy and well, and as well as our guests. So I just wanted to double down on that it's okay to be struggling with an assignment. And we'll work to do whatever we can to make it more comfortable. So please communicate with us.
It looks like MHKJM says they are known as fomites, upon which organisms may be present. It looks like I might have also convinced Jim to do some cleaning. Nice. Oh no, he says, my wife tells me to do my share of the cleaning. Your husband needs training. Oh, yeah. Are there any other questions?
Alice, I do have one.
Okay.
Just a quick point of clarification. Yeah, this is Jeremy. Net volunteers can also take advantage of like the isolation hotel and all those other services if need be. Is that correct?
If I understand your question, any person in Multnomah County who needs assistance in succeeding in isolation, and this took me, I think, half of this incident to get this straight. Isolation is what is required when you are symptomatic. So if I have symptoms and I have a test pending or I may have COVID, but I live in a multi-generational household and I am unable to isolate in my home without putting other people in my home at risk, then yes, the voluntary isolation motels are an option for me. And that would be Multnomah County sends folks through community health workers to determine whether or not they qualify for a voluntary isolation motel stay. There's also something called quarantine. And quarantine is what we request people do if they are a close contact. And close contacts are someone who was within 6 feet of someone for 15 minutes or more with or without a mask. So, and that's cumulative. So we have been saying cumulative from the very beginning, but Centers for Disease Control just recently came out and said that 15-minute rule is cumulative in a 24-hour period. So if you were standing next to somebody and you were within 6 feet and you were both wearing a mask and later you found out that that person had COVID or got COVID, then you would want to quarantine. And if everyone was following the protocols of COVID to the T, then when when you receive a positive test result that said that you had COVID, communicable disease would call you. If you answered the phone, communicable disease would have a conversation with you about who you have spent more than 15 minutes with, within 6 feet, with or without a mask, 2 days prior to your symptom onset and while you had symptoms. So if you, we now also have, and maybe we could share this also, Robert, I'm not sure, but it's available on our website. And our website has, I want to say it's called After Your Test. And it has a whole booklet about how you can go about notifying your own contacts. So if you got a positive COVID test, sometimes there's a delay when the test goes to the state and then communicable disease gets the test information and then calls you and walks you through how to do that notification. We are now encouraging people that get COVID positive tests to start doing their own close contact notifications. And the way you identify a close contact is anyone that you were within 6 feet from for more than 15 minutes with or without a mask for the 2 days prior to your symptom onset, and then anybody that you were in that same distance for that same duration with or without a mask when you were symptomatic. That was a very long way, Jeremy, of answering your question.
Yeah, I think the answer then is yes. That's what I was looking for. Thank you.
Isolation is for symptom people. Quarantine is not. So the voluntary isolation motels are for people that have symptoms. There are other places for people who are being put in quarantine.
Perfect. Well, I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat. I'm just going to give us a quick second to see if anyone has one for health and safety. Thank you so much, Alice, for sharing.
You bet. And I have a question for the people who tuned in. What were hoping to hear from us? And was there anything that we didn't cover that you had wanted to maybe hear about?
We do still have one more section, Alice, so we're not quite done.
Okay.
So a great question though for folks to mull over through our last session then. But Seth, I see you there on the screen. Thank you so much for participating with us today. And while we don't have any true content to follow, Seth, I'm going to leave you with just some interacting with the population and the human aspect of the work we're doing in shelters, and kind of some recommendations and guidance for these folks who will be participating in our winter weather shelters. So Seth, over to you.
Good, thank you. So when I do our transition projects orientation, one of the things that we touch on is getting into understanding somebody's background. And Alice, I appreciate you touched on that a bit. And real quick, before I go on, just ADD brain, got to get it out there. You cover the upper level, you're at your own. We do have a lower level. Okay. Let's see here. We do have a lower level. We're there? Are you hearing me?
We're hearing you, Seth.
Okay, sorry about that. Maybe I should just try and kill video. It's being an issue. There we go. Okay. So we do have a lower level of volunteerism as well, and so we don't let kids volunteer even with folks. That's just a thing. Of course, folks that are over 60, as Alice was saying, that's up to you. Now, getting back to talking about somebody's background and getting into how somebody may be just really, we used to say really out there, really neurodivergent. Prior to getting into the nonprofit world and doing the good things, and not that it wasn't then, but I had an adulting break between my 20 years in emergency medicine and coming into transition projects, and that was working in security downtown. And there was one person that I really go back to time and again, particularly with the lens of the place and time study and the duration that most folks in the Portland area have been living outside, and the majority of them over 10 years, some of them 20 or 30, is also understanding what they have been through to this point where they're with you at this moment. And there was one woman who stood out, and she was older. I want to say, on the street it's hard to tell, but maybe 50s. But she had one arm. She was maybe 100 pounds soaking wet, maybe 5'2". And so I got to think, this is somebody who, if you got within 5-6 feet of her, she would absolutely become aggressive and yelling and screaming, and sometimes coming at you. But where is that coming from? It's not like you had done something to provoke that. And so when you have folks that are really that aggressive and that posturing, take a step back and think about where they may have come from and how many years of assault, of physical assault and sexual assault and being taken advantage of that they're coming from. And you may just look like somebody from their past that they've had a very ill rapport with. And so recognize that it's not you, and you need to kind of back out of their space. And, like was said earlier, maybe find somebody else to try and interact with this client. In that security world, we would reference this as tapping out. And this is where I might recognize, just by being super aware of my surroundings, that there's some escalating voices and tension and whatnot. And I'm going to zero in on that. And I'm going to go in and tap on my partner's shoulder, my coworker's shoulder. Hey, I got this. And then let them walk off. Let them walk it off. Because it may be very much an issue of them both escalating on each other. And so if you can just intercede with that right there, let them walk off, and then stop and listen to the client's beef. Find out what's going on, what's got them irate. And, sometimes you may need to say something like, hey, it's their fourth day on this. They're running kind of ragged. I'm really sorry. They're a little short-tempered. And maybe we can deflect some of that. And that's an okay thing to do if it helps mitigate and de-escalate the situation, which it often can. And then you can be a ready listener to what issues they have. Now, sometimes you may just get a vibe that somebody is just super uncomfortable in the space. Coming from the world that I do, we weren't always terribly politically correct, and that's been a learned process, and I attribute a lot of that to TPI and getting back in school for a minute. But we would be able to quickly assess, working in a security role, somebody that was maybe transgendered or whatnot, and it was never really an education into how to approach that person. So in talking with one of my very close friends and getting back into community college at age 47, and being the guy that wasn't really plugged in on the correct terms, but always had the right heart, I would come home to one of my best friends, and it's appropriate to put out that she's lesbian in this context, because I'd come home and I'd be like, look, I don't go, what's this intersectionality? She says, well, y'all have something in common. Well, yeah, there you go. That's what intersectionality is. So I got past that and then started working for transition projects. And it's a very progressive agency. And every meeting, we start with our names and our pronouns. And I would come home and I'd talk to my friend and be like, I want to know somebody as Steve or Jennifer or whatever. Why do I need to know their pronouns? What does their sexuality have to do with who they are? And she says, listen, it's not about that. It's not about you and your comfort. And what she followed that with was imagine where I'm at in life. As a lesbian in this city, I know that there are people who want to kill me because of that. And so when somebody just very casually introduces themselves as, hey, I'm Seth, I go by he, him, nothing more than that. She says that sets up an entirely different conversation to where I'm not questionable on who this person and what their intent is, but they're already presenting as an ally and an advocate, just in that simple, casual reference. And I'll tell you, we did the camera earlier, it didn't work out. I could be in a bar with a fifth of whiskey and, acting the fool and still have kids come up to me and try and offer me their ID. I look that part, look the cop look, I guess. And so it's very easy for somebody to have a very defensive initial impression with me approaching them. And I'll tell you, the times that I have used this tool, how immediately disarming it is. And so that's what I wanted to export to you in terms of recognizing what somebody's background may be and why they may be so explosive to you, and that it's not necessarily you. And that, like I will also tell in the class that I'll put on, I don't go through life introducing myself as, hey, I'm Seth, he, him. But I'll use that tool if I find that somebody is particularly nervous about their situation or looks apprehensive. Again, it's one of those tools in a toolbox to just help really make an even plain situation and make somebody feel very comfortable and welcome. So that's what I've got to offer on this particular topic.
Perfect. Thank you, Seth. I really appreciate you sharing that. So let me just look and see if there were any questions here. Not seeing any specifically. I'll just give a couple seconds then to see if anyone has any questions for Seth and that kind of background information. Okay, so we've been through the three sections that we had. Actually, let me turn my camera on. Sorry about that. So we've been through each of the three sections that we had for you today. And so the rest of the time is just available for open questions and answers or clarifications on some of the content we touched on. Does any one of our facilitators have anything that they want to add after hearing some more content shared?
I don't have anything else. This is Jen. I guess I want to let folks know that they can reach out to us later if that's a more comfortable format, if they do have a question that they're hesitant to share. So you could definitely make sure that you have our contact information.
No, I wouldn't use it. It'll probably try and kill you.
Oh, Beth, you want to read? Yeah. Anyway, just to let folks reach out to us if they have any additional questions.
Perfect. Thank you.
Sorry about that. That's hilarious. I didn't realize I was not on mute. Guy's trying to take a fan that's shorted out. So, it might kill you.
Perfect. Well, I'm not seeing any other comments in our chat. So what I want to do last is just pull up and share with you the document we're going to send that we're calling our just winter weather packet. And I'm not going to go through it in detail, but I just want to share with you what kind of resource you're going to receive following this event. Let me pull it up. Okay, so let me zoom in so we can all see. We're going to have actually 5 sections. I'm going to add the notes from our event today. And so those have the notes from this event have a lot of really great links like the bed bug protocol or the Mount Scott standard operating procedure for de-escalation. A lot of good links for folks to use when considering or preparing for their shift. We also have what is considered section 1 right now, the position overview. This is going to kind of be a high level. Here's what your responsibility as a shelter worker is. Here's what the safety information we need you to know are, and then here's what resources are going to be available for you throughout the rest of this packet. Then we do have the general staff position description. This is going to be incredibly detailed with regard to your responsibilities, specific safety information that maybe we weren't able to cover, and the type of environment that a shelter will be in helping you prepare for your shift, and really just emphasizing a lot of the content we went through today. We've heard a lot of feedback for these position descriptions, these ICS 204 forms as they're called, about how they're not easy to read because they are so heavy with text. So just prepare yourselves when entering that document that it is a lot of information, but it is really important for you to review that and feel comfortable and knowledgeable in what you're going to be doing. The section 3 here on the screen is the frequently asked questions that we've heard over the past couple of years put together. This document grows longer every year as we receive more frequently asked questions, but at the moment, this is what we have for you. And the final section 4 there is the guide to working social distance shelters. So this content was developed for the COVID-specific shelters, congregate shelters this year. However, the information, of course, translates between what we're doing with the winter weather shelters, being in the environment of COVID. And so while some of the information was definitely for like the Oregon Convention Center, for some of those medical motels, we felt like this information was just good for you to have as well. This is the document I'll be sending out to everyone tomorrow, but I just wanted to at least share that with you and make sure that you are able to put some eyes on it. So let me close out of that, see if there's any final comments. Correct, yes. I should be changing that section 4. Thank you so much. Okay, well, I'm just going to open it one last time. Does anyone have any final comments, questions, concerns? Sam Hackney, have a question. What sort of ID will we be wearing? Jen, do you want to take that one?
We I don't know about the net Sam, I don't know if the net teams have ID that they generally wear. I think we have our staff usually just wear name tags so that folks know how to address them. Oh, Jeremy says they do. So you guys, net teams do have ID tags, so you'll be wearing those. County employees are welcome to wear their badges. I do not believe it's ever been required, but we do ask people to wear name tags. So Alice or someone correct me if I'm wrong, but I know that some folks just prefer to put their first name on their name tags.
If I could jump in there, yeah. For our spots, I would really prefer we just use the, hi, I am blank. We'll have the adhesive name tags, and of course we have the pronoun name tags. But I really don't want folks knowing where one place works for the other, just in case there's any ill intent. I'd rather keep it as sterile as a first name.
That's why we generally, yes, just have folks put a first name on there. And our county badge includes so much information that we usually just do the name tags. I hope that answers your question.
And Lily, as a net specific question, Jeremy, what's the latest, fastest way to get a long lost badge?
Hey, this is Jeremy. Send an email to net@portlandoregon.gov and we'll connect them to the badge request form. Thank you.
Okay, well, we really appreciate your time tonight. If you have any additional questions, we will provide contact information in the follow-up email tomorrow morning. But other than that, that is all the content we have for you. And we really appreciate participating. Sorry, I'm just reading this chat as well. So that is all we had. Thank you so much for your time, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.